to African Teapot Podcast. My name is Exie and I'm your host. Journey with me through Africa's vast variety of culture, heritage, and discuss issues most African families face, both home and abroad. Make sure you add this podcast to your frequent podcast rotations, and don't forget to share and follow this podcast. Hello listeners, thank you for tuning in and being with me this week yet again. And before I get into anything, quick mental check, how far, right? As for me, I'm doing okay. I had a good weekend, so I am taking that energy and going into next week. And hopefully you are doing the same thing as well. And before I get into our proverb, our topic for today or for this week is, pardon me, that's ignorant, okay? And the proverb that goes along with this says, if you are filled with pride, then you will not have room for wisdom. And we'll just get into our old Jeep again, Safari Jeep. And this episode was fun because when I put the interactions on social media, people had a lot to say. And this is just those questions that we Africans get, and it's unbelievable. When you hear it, you're thinking, you thought someone is smart, and when they open your mouth, you're like, you're asking me this kind of question? It shows you are very, very ignorant, and ignorant in a society where we are like a global village. Like, you can Google stuff and be better informed about things, right? So I'll just go ahead and get into the stories that inspired this topic in this week's episode. So last week, when catching up with my girlfriend, catching up in the week, and I was saying how terrible my week was and stuff, she went ahead to tell me the weird thing that happened to her at work. And before we realized it, we were talking about, the topic for today. And that's how I got inspired to do this. She shared a personal experience of hers, and she said she went to work. She is a nurse. She went to work and she has a patient, an 80-year-old patient. And the 80-year-old comes up to her and asks her if she's a slave. I know. The first thing is that there's that silence in your brain, like, what? An 80-year-old asking that? And so my friend proceeds to ask her, who told you I'm a slave? And she said, I don't know, I'm just asking, are you in slavery? And she asked her, that's my friend, who told you about slave and slavery? And she said, it just came up in my head by myself, right? And when she tried, getting more out of the kid, like, okay, where's this information coming from? Because clearly it's not coming from school. Before you guys come chewing at me, oh, they learned it at school. No, in the United States, they don't teach 80-year-olds about slavery. They do not. Most of our kids at that age get this information from parents, from adults around them, adults that surround them with this kind of information. And so my friend is telling me, well, she had always gotten a vibe, I would say, from this patient's parents, right? When you can tell they're looking down on you for being black or something, I guess would say racism, or it's stereotype, or it's bias, however you would call it, but it is clearly something. And I was just in disbelief. And before I realized it, I was sharing my personal experience, which happened to me last week, guys. This was last week as well. I was at work, and in the break room, they had a TV in there in the lunchroom. And if you know this show called The West Wing, I think it's on Netflix now, The West Wing, it's talking about the American president, his day-to-day activities and how his team, his staff goes around solving problems and things like that arise day to day. So in one of those episodes, they had one of the African presidents. I think he was from Zambia or Zimbabwe, one of those. But he was visiting the US to talk about HIV and AIDS relief, right? They wanted the US to support them, to help them, aid and stuff. And so on in the movie, or in that scene, because it's a series, but in that specific episode and scene, the African, or the Zimbabwe, I think the Zambian president, I think he's from Zambia, but I think the Zambian president had a translator, and not that the president couldn't speak English, but he decided to speak another language, which I don't know, right? I don't know what the language was. I don't know if it was Swahili. I don't know what it was. So immediately the US president said something to him. He responded in, a different language. A lady in the lunchroom immediately calls me out and says, "Edna, what is he saying?" And so I looked at her and I said, "I don't know." And she said, "What do you mean? You mean you don't understand the language?" And I said, "No, I do not understand the language." She got upset because she felt, maybe I knew it and I didn't want to answer. And so she proceeded in saying something along the lines of, I was asking, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm asking, you didn't have to act like you don't understand what he's saying." And then she walked out of the break room. So another colleague sitting in there tried to explain to me, like, I think she just doesn't know, so you shouldn't get offended or something like that. I'm like, what do you mean I shouldn't get offended? It's like you see someone Asian sitting next to you and they speak Mandarin on TV and you expect them to understand Mandarin. They could be Asian looking, but maybe they're Japanese, maybe they're Chinese, maybe they're Korean or something, right? From Taiwan. They could be from anywhere, even though they look Asian. You wouldn't just assume they all understand Mandarin. Just like you. You look just like Canadian, you look like English, you look like a French guy, you look like a German guy. So if they suddenly speak German on TV and I turn around to you and ask you to translate German for me, wouldn't you be surprised and confused? Because the first thing I should ask you is, do you understand that question? Or not question, sorry. Do you understand the language? That makes me understand there's more than one language in Africa. Right? Anyways, before I get into breaking it down, these were the two stories because I exchanged it with my girlfriend on the phone, and we talked about it. She said her experience and I said mine, and we laughed about it, and we were just talking about these ridiculous questions that people would ask you and yada yada yada, and that's how I got to this topic. So now let me break and go. I have 10 questions which I gathered the moment I put this question out on social media, and I'm thinking that we should go ahead and get into those questions and then just break down whatever it is, if that kind of makes sense. Okay, so here goes the questions. So let me jump into these questions that are common questions that, most Africans would relate to. Question number 1 is, do you speak African? And I'm going to say here now, there is no language called African. And Africa is a continent with 54 countries in it. So no, we don't all speak the same language. It's like someone telling you they're from Europe and you expect everybody there to speak German. No, some people speak English, some speak French, some speak Dutch, some speak Portuguese, Italian. You understand what I'm saying? Greek, Latin, they speak different languages. It's the same thing in Africa. We all don't speak one big language So an African is someone from Africa, not a language. Question number 2 is, are lions on the streets and do you ride elephants? No, we do not. If we want to see lions and elephants, we go to the zoo, just like you, or you go to those safaris, like in East Africa. Kenya is amazing with safaris. And this is also just to echo something out. Africa is rich in culture, diversity, and in terms of tourism. Anything you want to see, you will see in Africa. And some of these scary animals you guys think live way in the thick forest, rainforest thick, where it's swampy, cold, and dark. I don't even know where that is. If you ask me, I don't even know where to take you. If you ask, most of us, we've seen animals in the zoo, and most Africans probably saw those animals in the zoo, maybe here in the States or in UK or in Canada, just like you. Okay, they don't move around roaming the streets. The things you probably see, chicken and goats and whatever, if you go on the street, that's about it. But you will not have like a tiger just walking in there and taking a stroll in the city or or something. No, guys, that's not the case. And then another question is, do you have clothes in Africa? Okay, one thing. You guys put on beads, earrings, jewelry. We have the tribal fabrics that you guys know are a theme for Africa. It's a cultural wear. You guys will put on African attires. You guys will see people put on African fabric or clothes like the dashiki. And I don't understand how after seeing that or knowing that, you still think we move around naked. That's something that is baffling to me. Like, how would you put on our clothes, or you see fabrics that you are like, oh, these are tribal fabrics. You guys see it. And then at the same time, you think we have these fabrics and then we don't have clothes. It's the same thing. Do you guys have buildings in Africa? Yes, just like you guys. The skyscrapers or whatever you would call it, and you have the single floors or whatever we do. You have the huts, they are in there. Are there huts there? Yes. But you thinking that is primarily the huts, that is ridiculous. That's not how it is. So when you go there, the hotels, they are built just like you guys' hotels, the schools. Some schools are built like that and some are not, right? But for you to think everything is a hut or we live on trees, that is ridiculous. Another question we get is Nigeria the capital of Africa? Like I've said so many times, Africa is a continent with 54 or so countries that are independent in it. They have their own presidents and the cabinet and their own laws and constitutions. They have their own elections and stuff. So no, Nigeria is not a capital of Africa. Nigeria is just a country in Africa, just like Burkina Faso, just like Mali, just like Ghana, just like South Africa, like Kenya, Tanzania, right? These are all independent countries within that continent of Africa. Another question we get is, and I got this one, is how did you get here? Okay. And someone had gone further to ask me if I got here by a bus or by a boat. And I couldn't believe he asked me if I got here by a boat. I'm like, you mean I got here by a boat like in the slavery time? And his eyes grew larger and he just was like, I'm sorry. I'm like, I got here just like you get here and go to any other place in the world using a plane. So we do have airports. And sometimes I think we Africans try to be sarcastic with them just because we can't believe that there is that much ignorance coming out from someone. And guys, we can tell the difference between you speaking to us in a demeaning fashion, like you ask a question like you already know the answer and you're trying to mock us. When you ask me, do you guys have clothes in Africa? And I say yes, and you go, really? Are you sure? You are offending me right there, because if you weren't sure, why don't you go Google it? Right? And you would see that we have industries that produce these textiles and produce these things that are here. Do we ride elephants? No, we ride cars. And I'm going to say this here. Because Africa is a cash-based economy and society, we don't do credits. Sometimes these vehicles that are limited editions, like let's take for example, like in Nigeria, you have these limited editions of vehicles. They first and foremost, these companies will take them to Africa because Africa pays you cash. What you use here, like you finance your car, finance your house, mortgages and stuff, we don't have that. You build your house, you buy your building materials and you build your house. You get money, you buy your car. You get money, you buy your bike. You understand? That's how our society works. We don't have this credit system that you guys have over here. So these cars, the Lamborghinis, the Porsche, the Mercedes and whatever, they are all there. You'll be surprised when you go there, right? And why Africa is so big on tourism, it's like most of our things, we keep a lot of our things in the natural state in which they are. One, because we know we are a big attraction for tourism. So when they show you those things on TV, it doesn't necessarily mean that the average African moves around living hurts and stuff. No. Hopefully this explains a lot. And sometimes, if you can't travel physically to Africa, please travel via the web. Travel via the internet. Google stuff. It's okay to Google stuff. And then when you come to me, oh, I'm curious. So I heard about this, blah, 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 blah. Is that true or is that the case? Don't come up to me and just assume that I know something or just assume I'm ignorant about something. Just assume I wasn't putting on clothes. You assume I would just know a language just because the person on TV looks like me or has an accent similar to mine. That is insulting. Okay? It is insulting. And another question we get, oh, when did you learn English? Like I said, English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, all these languages, we have close to more than 2,000 or so languages in Africa. It includes English, French, and all this, and Spanish, and whatever, Portuguese. It includes these languages. So when we speak it, it's not because we just learned it. We have been speaking these languages. That also doesn't mean that everybody's going to speak English, because some people are French speakers. Someone from Algeria, somebody from Congo, they would primarily speak French because French is their official language, right? So they would learn English subsequently when they get here, maybe for such people, or people who speak only Swahili and Portuguese. But for you to say, just assume because I have an accent and I speak different from you, I must have learned English when I got here, is insulting. No, that's not the case. We learn English just like you guys learning English here from birth, right? So it's the same thing. But anyways, one other ridiculous question I had, guys. Someone had asked me, so is Muslim the religion of Africa or voodoo? And first, I didn't know how to correct that question because I'm like, first and foremost, Muslim is not a religion. Muslim is someone who practices Islam. So Islam is the religion and Muslim is the person who believes in Islam. Just like Christianity is the religion and a Christian is who practices Christianity, right? And voodoo is practiced all over the world, just like here. You go to Louisiana, New Orleans, you have people dealing with the voodoo dolls. You have it everywhere. It's the same thing in Africa. I don't know why. You guys believe that, I don't know, some magic potions or we turn people into chickens and weird stuff. No, we are civilized. The fact that we keep some of our customs and culture to keep our identity and to we try to pass our culture and traditions from generation to generation. Doesn't mean we're stupid, we're primitive, we dumb or something. That is not the case. So we are just here to debunk a lot of these myths and stereotypes, and hopefully from next episode we'll just proceed right? But hopefully from here we've all understood certain questions are rude, certain questions you look ignorant, and we get offended when you make those assumptions like we are not intelligent enough or we are not civilized enough. And sometimes if we don't question you back, it's because we are trying to be polite. And at this juncture, I'm gonna stop talking and just see you guys next week for another episode. Bye. Thank you for listening and hope you join me for the next episode. You can always reach us via email at africanteapot@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at african_teapot.